So, we are live. Welcome to episode 4 of the Break Magazine podcast. This week's episode is all about the Dakar Rally and, more importantly, how to finish it. Finishing the Dakar, I think for most adventure riders, is kind of the ultimate goal. It's our Everest. It's the peak of seeing what you can achieve as a person. And I think one of the coolest things about that race is that you have the opportunity to test yourself against some of the fittest, best motorbike riders in the world. This week's guest is Patsy Quick, and she had first attempted the Dakar in 2006 as Britain's first woman to attempt it, first woman from Britain to finish the race, former European Enduro champion, star of Channel 4's Escape TV show, and now in charge of Desert Rose Academy, I believe you're called, which along the way you've kind of helped many people attempt to achieve their dream of finishing the Dakar Rally and other equivalent sized rallies. So to start with, talk us through that journey of how you got to your first Dakar in 2003. Where did that dream come from and how did you make it happen?
Good question, really. And in a way, there's not actually a simple answer to this. I was always a tomboy. I was the one that had the chipper before the grifter, and I'd had an interest in motorbikes, but it probably wasn't an off-road bikes. But it wasn't really until I got together with my first husband, Clive, and then it started to evolve, and I went and bought, a trials bike, and that, started racing back from the woods rather than trialing back from the woods. The speed element came into it, and then got an XR400 when I shouldn't have done, because we'd actually got a loan to do a property up, and Patsy went and spent it on buying an XR400, which didn't go down quite too well at the time. And then got into the ACU, had started a British Championship, then did the European, and it was just at the end of the European. And although I'd watched Dakar and seen elements about it, I wouldn't say it was something I'd really knew about from a kid. Motorcycling wasn't something that ran in the family at all. And then, in fact, it was Paul Round that phoned me up from Rally Raid UK, and that's how I went to the first Dakar in 2003 with a Honda, and then I just got on this guinea pig wheel of failure, go back, failure, go back, failure, finish. So that's how it all came. I mean, there was lots of stories, lots of changes along the way, but once I'd got into actual racing, and then as I say, when Paul Round phoned me up, and a good friend of mine, Andrew Neary, and then it just exploded.
So I think you just touched on it a little bit there, but the most interesting part of your Dakar story for me is the progression and the lessons that you had to go through learning. So what were the biggest challenges that you faced, and kind of what were the biggest lessons that you went through from that first time going and not finishing to finishing 2006 with Clive?
I think the first one, obviously, is the financial one. So right from the beginning, and each subsequent year, probably naively, you go for the first time. I don't know whether I actually thought I would finish. I can't really remember if a clear-cut memory of that. You just go, you're very naive. You don't know what it's like. I'd done one rally before that. And so when I had the accident, loss of spleen, and came back, when I went in 2004, it's that whole financial commitment again, being selfish again, putting other things on the back burner, mentally, because I'd got to overcome some fear, having crashed fairly significantly in the first one. But I can't remember, there wasn't really a choice in my head. It was to go back. And somehow we agreed, Clive and I at the time, that we'd raise the money. You know, there was no social media, so it was really very, very difficult. No one really knew about Dakar as such, like people do now in the off-road world. You know, they remember, you know, Mark Thatcher getting lost.
Yeah.
So very difficult. It was a case of literally, you know, I made up. In fact, I dagged them out the other day, and I couldn't believe how much work we put into them. You know, big A3 portfolios. Yes, I'd sort of hit the headlines a bit in even the daily papers after my crash. So all coverage is good coverage in a way, even though it's a fairly traumatic moment in my life. And sending them off to sponsors. So that was one, the whole financial aspect. The mentally, I think you are either put off by something like an accident, or you're not.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky. I had the support around me from my then husband, and it was then decided that yes, Zippy, the infamous Zippy, would come along. Not as it was known then as a water carrier, like the Top Boys used to have. No, I didn't want someone to pick my bike up. It was more mentally almost to enjoy that journey and to be able to share it with someone, and also probably for my husband at the time, that somebody else was out there.
Yeah.
So I was very adamant, you know, I didn't want anyone picking up my bike. You know, I was going to be one of the lads, that was it. But it was also very much to be able to share, be able to express yourself to somebody else that understood what you'd been going through each day.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is very important, because you're in this little bubble of a helmet, and you know, sometimes you'd get to a checkpoint, or you'd get to your mandatory stop in the day, and you'd lift your helmet and you go, blah, 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 did you say, shit? And then you'd get back, and then the first person would be your mechanic or your it's having now been on the assistant side, it's a bit of a thankless job, because you'd get back and you just have to tell people. So if you had a good day, it was great, but if you had a bad day, then they were the first and firing line. out. So to do that 3 times was exceedingly challenging in a financial aspect. And I look back now, recently having the time with the lockdown to go through lots of old photos and see all the time we spent putting these portfolios together to physically mail out to people. It's also the selfishness of that rally of any big event, not necessarily rally. I think to any big event where you have to train very hard and raise a lot of money, it doesn't sit very easily with me.
Okay. So you've been running the support since, I think, 2007 now, with lots of different big races, rallies, Romaniacs, Ceres, Hellas, kind of pretty much anything that most people would want to do in that world, you kind of do assistance at. So when someone comes to you and they say, I want to do Dakar, or I want to do Africa Eco Race, how does that conversation go? What do you ask them? What do you talk about? Do you talk about their riding ability, their fitness, their why? What does that conversation go like?
Yes, I think that conversation has changed slightly over the years since I've been doing assistance, and it's getting a feel for that person. So initially, whether it's come through an email or a telephone call, and I have had a lot of them since 2007. Certainly in the last 5 years, certainly as rallies have gained momentum in the UK. And first of all, it's never to judge by initial email or a telephone conversation, because I'm a big believer, you've got to keep yourself open. Everyone comes from different walks of life, and it's trying to just wheedle out sometimes now for me more why they want to do it, because nobody ever understands, particularly those two events, until they've done the first one.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the guys that came with me this year on Eco would agree with that. Doesn't matter how much I talk to them, how much, it always becomes quite a shock. So it's trying to get a feel for their riding. So if you take those two events in particular, I'm almost keen to get them out to Morocco sooner than later. Mm-hmm. But I think one is because that's where we go and do the training. It's the nearest bit of sand. But it's also trying to get them down and actually talk to them so you can actually get a feel, are they really serious? Are they really going to push themselves? Is it just something that they want to tick off the bucket list? Are they really competitive? Are they going there and wanting to do well and get places, or is it just all part of an adventure? And I think it's sometimes getting across to them that it's actually enjoying the journey to the start, mm-hmm. because that can actually sometimes be the hardest journey. So it's like, now I'm a little bit more bold and a little bit more honest with people and say, look, how much time have you got?
Yeah.
If you've got 2 years or 3, that's great. To try and do it in a year, it's great, but you need to tell me how much time you can take off. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you're in a time position and a financial place where you can go, right, I can spend 6 months of the year getting ready, then great.
Yeah.
But so I think probably now I'm a bit more honest with people, simply because I've seen so many people want to make that journey, and some get there, some don't, and so now I think I'm almost being by being more honest, I'm doing my job better in a way.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I can imagine that's a complicated, difficult conversation to have.
Yes, and I think sometimes as a woman, sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's harder. So if we get to Morocco, sometimes I can get away with, well, you've got a long way to go. I think we need to start back at the basics, or sometimes it's just letting people have their emotional moments, and then they'll come back and say, okay, Patsy, right, now I can understand a little bit what you're saying, and I can go away from this and we can make a plan. And so it's being able to read people, I think, as well.
So we get pardon,
which sometimes we have to be very careful,
tactful. So we get quite a lot of questions around people's riding ability when it comes to Dakar. We make a lot of how-to videos, and it's a question I get asked quite a lot. So what do you think is the minimum realistic level that someone needs to be at to finish that race?
What, again, I've noticed over the last few years is a lot of the lads that want to get into the rallies have actually come from the adventure bike world. Mm-hmm. So yes, they might have been used to quite big, heavy bikes. Speed isn't an issue, but they haven't got that technical ability. They haven't come up what I call through the enduro world, or from the motocross world, Charles. And they haven't been through that racing they haven't got that racing background, which I think actually is very, very important, which for numerous reasons. So I've seen, Desert Rose has taken 2 people that really I would say were sportsman riders, and got one of them who completed Dakar in 2010. So, but it's how much time you have, mm-hmm. I think. So I think the minimum is, if you're talking enduro, is a ability, is a good clubman, a good clubman rider, mm-hmm. but
So for American viewers, that's kind of like a translation of that would be like a good B grade rider. You know, if A grade is expert, and then you have pro class, Clubman is our B grade. So a good kind of mid pack Clubman rider.
Yes. Some and I think, as I say, I think what I've noticed is the guys that have come more from the adventure biking background, which has been a lot. They're quite happy to go fast, and then they wonder why they have the offs, the big accidents, or when it gets a little bit technical. You know, the rallies isn't technical like we would refer to with enduro as such, but it's when it's also reading the track. I think people that have raced, they read a track and a lot and see what's coming up. And when it gets a little bit more technical, so whether it's in the rocks or in the dunes, that skill shows through a lot more. On the fast piste, anybody can open the throttle and go for, but they're not necessarily always reading the train, I think, like someone that has raced. And that's what I've really noticed, but also from a mechanical point of view. Very much so, that people that have raced tend to, when they stop, they're looking at their bike, they've got that ear, and they've got that sympathy, and they know how much to push the bike. And I think that's what in the last few years I've sort of struggled more with to get across to people. Because they haven't actually come through the enduro world.
Kind of not learnt those kind of underground base skills that you pick up just by surviving.
And everything, and the guys have been very good, and they take that on board, and they go away and they research about specific tools, and they talk to other people. Well, it's my partner Chris now, who's done lots of rallies. You know, what do you carry? And if they come away with us, that's the beauty of doing a few events before a big one. Is talking to the other guys that are with Desert Rose, and it's learning all those little bits, and then taking a bit from everybody and thinking, I can see now, that's why he's got a bum. You know, it's amazing. You know, the lads don't like bum bags anymore. They don't like carrying anything on them, and it's like, if you'd come through the enduro background, you would have a bum bag, you'd have your tools in there. And I have some of my customers probably if they're watching this go, yes, she told me she'd got it. I'd got to get rid of my rucksack on the back. I was covering too much and all that. But it's because I've learnt the hard way.
So if I'm sat at home watching this now, and I am that kind of enthusiastic trail rider, adventure rider, I'm pretty good, but I'm kind of maybe not quite at the level where Dakar is there yet. I need to do a bit of work. What do you think is the best path to get there?
If you've got the time, in an ideal world this is, if you've got the time and you've got the funds, give yourself at least a couple of years and enjoy those 2 years. That's all part of it, all part of the road. And come away with us to Morocco, or other people that offer training in the gym, especially if you're going to go, or if you want to do a big desert base rally. You need to understand that, because if you look back through Dakar, that's where people get hurt or come out the race, is in the dunes. So you need to understand, and then try and do as many perhaps of the European rounds. So I think you need to do one really good desert-based rally. I think Morocco Desert Challenge is very well run, and then more importantly, it's got bikes, it's got cars, and it's got trucks. Because for a lot of the guys that go and turn up at Dakar, that might be the first time they've raced with trucks, and that can be exceeding elder cars, really scary.
Yep, it sure is.
Very scary. So it's a private run event, so the cost. But coming back to what you asked me, so good And that is basically half a Dakar or half an eco race. So if you do that and you think, well, went through that okay, you know where you stand, and certainly it's being in that environment as well, which I think is really important. Meeting lots of people, seeing what goes on, because everyone has so many questions, and as much as I can answer them, it doesn't really make any sense until you go to a rally of a fair size.
Okay.
And also your fitness, because that's the other thing that I do see is, yes, you've got to be bike fit, but you've also got to be fit as a person, physically and mentally. But physically, so that when it gets tough, you're not then struggling also physically. And understandably, all the lads spend a fortune on their bikes, but they need to think about themselves, I think, very importantly. So when it gets tough, or when it gets to that 7 or 8 days, certainly the day before rest day, that's when you see people go out, because they're tired. And that's when mistakes are made. That's when concentration lapses. So if you've got 2 years for the sort of average person, from a financial, time wise, family, everything, is if you're already in that sort of enduro world, hare and hounds, is to keep on some of that racing. But then I would say the minimum is one desert-based rally, and at least a small rally if you can.
So if people are at the point where their technical skill isn't good enough, will those rallies bring them on enough to get them there?
Yes, and I think if they're willing to then go back and seek help, because we can all sometimes sort of bluster on, in the wrong direction, thinking we know what we're doing. But, it's to find someone for your technical ability, and some your practical skills. What goes wrong, either a situation or something with the bike, that I think's overlooked a lot of the time. They spend a fortune on their bike, and they expect that bike to get them to the finish. Well, anything mechanically can go wrong. So I think it's a big picture.
So I think one of the most common things after kind of riding ability that people are interested in when it comes to rally is the navigating side of things. It's always the first question, even from people I know that are very good riders. They're like, how does the roadbook work? Am I going to be okay? And am I going to end up in a wrong country? So how important do you think the navigating is, and how difficult do you think it is to learn to navigate well? Is it dependent as well on rider skill, or is it just a completely different thing?
I think it's a completely different thing. And I think some people, their brain just understands it a bit quicker than the next person. My partner Chris, he loves the road books, and I've got some customers, they love the road book, and they're very good at it. They understand, but they see the information, whereas I can be, right, let's just get in front of that person in front, and that's he's gone the wrong way. I'm not actually seeing the information, because I'm thinking, now when I get back I must make sure the lads have done that. This was a few years ago when I sort of got back into rallies, but also running assistance, and I wasn't actually concentrating, I wasn't actually seeing the information. So I think some people's brain are just keyed in that way. They understand it, but it's not rocket science. And I think the most common thing certainly from lads that like to race, they have just got to wind that throttle in. They just want to go, and they'll follow anybody, and then they get lost. So it's not difficult, but I think you have just got to learn to ride at the speed that you can actually navigate. I think with each rally's very different, and it's some of the smaller rallies, I would say, have much harder navigation than Dakar or Africa Race, or perhaps MDC, which is a very big event now, because you've got a lot more competitors on that route. So there's you could say there's more tracks to follow. But on some of the smaller rallies, and you have, even if it's the GPS, that's the mandatory GPS, which is only giving you a certain amount of information to keep things simple. Whereas on some of the smaller rallies, that's it. It's just the road book. There is no GPS. So you have to, as you know from doing so, you have to get it right.
Yep.
And the smaller rallies, certainly the European rallies, there's a lot more changes of direction and turns, whereas in the desert there's obviously less turns and much bigger distances between changes of direction. So again, by doing a smaller European event, I think that really gets you to really home in on that road book, because you are lost very quickly if you're just going to follow the person in front.
Yeah.
I've seen that. And for some people, it just clicks. And some people would go to a rally having never kind of had any training or understanding on the road, but they just pick it up like that. Others, you can take them away and they'll do several rallies and they're still not getting it. And it's I think some people just see and understand the information.
Okay.
It is very important.
Yeah.
And especially now, there's obviously new rulings coming in, and on Dakar with the road books being handed out in the morning, and now possibly going to and pre-coloured and marked up, which I think is, personally, it's for that event. I think it's been and getting rid of the map man. I think it's a really good move personally.
How much weight do you put on the whole colouring in, marking road books up? Obviously there's a lot of stigma around it, and all the pro riders turn their books into a child's colouring book, and everyone has their own style and their own kind of method for it. And I know when I started, I didn't know what I was doing, so I coloured everything in. So how much do you put into that? How much do you help your guys with that? Or
what I say to them, it's not a Bible. There is no golden rule book. You must colour in like this and mark this and do that. It's how you see the information. So how I would mark a road book would be very different to you. I think it's the most boring bloody job. Hate it. And putting it in. But only because now I have to highlight so much to try and see it, or enlarge for the thing. And some of my customers have actually made magnifying road books. Can't see. But it's how it works. What I say, it's how it works for you. We can give tips, but then I think it's only going to work for you after you've done a few events or training trips at Morocco, and then it clicks, and then you'll either add more information or more colours. As you say, some people, it's just like, for me, it's change. I think it's change of direction, dangers, and the information that I won't see because I'm not concentrating.
Okay.
And so everybody, Chris would have a way, and everybody would has their different ways. And I think, having seen some of the top riders, it's the cap's very important. But but for us mere mortals down at the other end, it's seeing a fence on the left hand side, that they wouldn't even see. So I think the big thing is it's going at a speed. To be able to learn it, you've got to go at a speed where you do learn it.
Yeah,
because so many people just just follow the person in front. So they've spent all that money and gone on an event, and they haven't really understood the road book because they get carried away in the moment. I mean, which we all do.
Very much. So I think, one of the coolest things about Dakar for me is that it is an endurance event. It's 2 weeks long. It's 10,000 K. It's very much about your ability to sustain your output. And the guys at the top of Dakar, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the guys at the top of Dakar are unbelievable athletes. They're some of the fittest people in the world. They're genuine athletic specimens of humans. But for us mere mortals, how much do you think fitness matters to actually getting across the line? And when it comes to your people that you're helping with Eco Race and Dakar, how do you help them with their fitness? What do you kind of direct them towards doing?
Yes, I do think it's very important, and I think that's changed a lot. I think fitness for the top boys has changed a lot. They are, as you say, they're just top athletes now, and you can see the way they train, and I think that has changed a lot. For us, kind of mere mortals at the back a bit more, I think if you are physically fit, you're more likely to be mentally fit, because when it gets really tough and you are really exhausted, if you're more exhausted because you haven't put in that effort and that time, it runs you down mentally. Then you make more mistakes, and I think then it's a vicious circle. So for one of the things what used to be very cruel actually is I used to get to do the 24-hour dawn till dusk.
I remember it well.
And actually I need to bring that back into play a little bit more again, but something where it's really going to push you. And when we're out in Morocco, I don't push people, probably because there's a mix. Sometimes they're training for rally, sometimes they just want to come and experience the desert, and because you're not in a rally bubble and the safety aspect and all the rest of it, sometimes it's quite hard to push people as hard as you know that they should be being pushed. But bike fitness and gym fitness, as us riders know, is very difficult. But it's little things really. It's like being able to push your bike. Well, we've all got space, push your bike up a hill 10 times and see how you get on. Because when we're in our kit, it's all right going to the gym, doing a few rows and the rest of it, but when you've got your kit on or you're holding it and you're trying to do anything physically, pick that bike up, that's what I always remember. That's when I just used to and I like to think, looking back, I was very fit, but doing anything when you got your kit on.
And in the desert, in the heat.
In the heat, exactly, yeah. Or at night, as it was then, when the cold comes down as well. So I think there's probably too much emphasis sometimes on the bike and all the bling than actually on themselves. And taking it and not actually expecting the bike to do all the work.
Yeah.
They have to be prepared to put the fuel into themselves. That's my own feeling. So I think from trying to find bike events, be it a 3-hour hare and hound, where to the longer enduros, where you don't just go and just try and finish. You try and get a good place, and you're pushing yourself. For me, towards the end, I probably we didn't have the funds to do many events. In fact, I think too that I didn't ride a lot, but I would train a lot. Now there's all those, there's the CrossFit. There's lots of different training programs out there that aren't that expensive. The guys, whether it's Johnny Walker or Billy Bolt, or that it's all accessible. Whereas I just go to the local gym and say to them, I'm going to go and do a rally, and they just look at me and go, what? Not understand biking, but now there's everything, isn't there?
But even when you went to Dakar, you still did a lot of gym work. You were still pretty fit in 2006.
Yes, because I couldn't afford to actually go and do enduros or have an enduro bike at the same time as the rally bike.
Okay.
So I do think it's kind of sometimes gets forgotten about.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I'm sure you've seen kind of dozens of people at this point, customers and friends and people that you've met, go to Dakar, go to Africa race, those kind of big ones, and not finish.
Yeah.
What is it that kind of you see most often that stops people finishing that race? Is it that they haven't ticked all the boxes? Is it that they kind of don't quite have the grit or the attitude? Or what is the kind of the thing that you see most often?
I'd actually say we as Desert Rose have been very lucky and happy to have got a very high percentage of our riders to the finish of all events. So for us, it's the mechanical failures that we hate the most, and that sounds a bit harsh because I don't want anybody to have an accident and hurt themselves. But for us, when we're working on the bikes, to get that call and your guts you just feel sick, actually. There's the mother in me of, wanting to get everyone back and safe and looking after them. But we have been very lucky and, very proud that we have got so many riders to the finish of all the events. So out of the ones that haven't got, it's actually been through injury more than a mechanical problem, which, without sounding harsh, is better for us.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, we don't want, and we can't guarantee mechanical problems because it's mechanical with all moving parts. We can only do our best and hope that riders have a sympathy to their machines. So we've probably seen more people. So you could then say, well, why have people crashed? And I think tiredness, not so therefore they lose their concentration. Certainly on the desert rallies, because one minute you're just going along thinking, you're Sam Sunderland, and the next minute you're on deck.
Yes.
No, I'm not. Oh, I thought the desert was flat. No, actually it's not at all. So yeah, I think it's been the ones that have crashed. Some have just been very, very unlucky. And you do need that luck. Everything was going right, and then the bike barks, kicks, you've landed, but no, you've landed on rocks. So again, I think the fitter that you are, and the more kind of racing knocks, being offs that you've had, you learn to fall. I can't believe I'm saying. You learn to fall better. You learn to feel a little bit softer than the person that might not. Yeah, you do. You can see it happen, and it's probably the same with horse riders.
Mm-hmm.
You can just like millisecond know it's all going to go Pete Tong, and that's it. Yeah, I'm still doing it now, like I did last week on Charles' bike in the stream, face planted at a treat. But I knew it was coming, so I think yes. So I think, and the odd mechanical failure is by something that we couldn't have prevented, which can be a combination of rider error and just engines or a part giving up and going pop, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think as a kind of spectator, one of the best things about Dakar is those stories that come out every year of outrageous levels of determination. And when you took part in Channel 4's show Escape, we kind of got to see a little glimpse of what that determination in you looks like. There was that scene where you're pushing and dragging a 100-litre fuel tank through the mud, and all the other people are sat on the other bank going, you're doing a really good job, and you're sat there pushing it and dragging it, and no one else can do anything because they're all knackered. And so how much does that determination and grit matter to getting to the end of Dakar? And I think more importantly, is that something you think can be learned, or is that something you kind of never figure out until you're in that situation where you need it?
Yeah. I think as an individual, you do know whether you've got that. But then there would be a percentage of people that, until, quite rightly, as you said, they're in that situation. And I've met people that have really surprised me, and not just in the biking world. That I thought, God, you really have, you're really steely. You've got that something, and with the rally world, you really do need that. You need to have that in you, and I don't know if it's something, and I've been asked for something you can make yourself or train yourself to have, because you don't necessarily know until you're in that situation. You might have had little things in life, hardships or physical worries, financial, and you overcome them. But I think the one thing about the rally world is that when you're out there on your own, especially in the desert, which I think we have this little sort of fear, this you're in the middle of nowhere. Certainly when it was in Africa, you had that. But you do need that. You really do need to have some balls. And yes, I have told some people in the past to grow some, to use Zippy's expression, grow some balls. Because if you just, and perhaps I have sort of mollycoddled people too much, and that has changed a bit, but you do need it. You can't, at the first scratch on your finger, I can't carry on. Or if you have a mechanical issue, that's it, I've given up. But you have to want something enough, and you've got to have that in you. And I still don't know, even at my age, whether if you haven't got that, when the shit hits the fan, whether you can train yourself, whether you can. I don't know.
I suppose that's kind of ultimately the point of going, right? Is to see,
yeah.
For most of us, it's to see whether you're capable of dealing with that situation or not.
Yeah. Whether you whatever you do in life, when you have your own Everest, whether you can get to the top, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Dakar or Africa race. there's lots of things in life that come along, and it's just whether you can really dig deep. And I didn't know I'd got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm stubborn, but it needs a bit. It needs a bit more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest is the pain, the physical pain, and how do we measure our own pain threshold?
Yeah, it's a great question.
You know, when Zippy had to tow me through sand, and I'd you know, my knee was the size of an elephant. But I think the power of adrenaline is fantastic. Once that adrenaline kicks in, you don't feel pain. Do the next day, the day after.
Yeah.
That's what gets you. You've got to have that adrenaline. And I think to have that adrenaline, you really got to want something.
Mm-hmm. Really
want it.
Yeah.
But then there's different changes really want. You know, you need to be a selfish person, which I always like to think I'm not a selfish person. So in certain circumstances, I would prefer pain than being selfish.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is a bit weird, isn't it, really? But that's my natural, that's my personality. So I would prefer to be the one being towed than be the one towing. You know, I mean, because, you know, if it was someone I didn't know, you know, and I was in a situation. So, but I think we all need that in life. We all need to have that moment where we have to dig really deep.
Yeah.
Really deep.
It's how you find out what you are and what you're made of, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, for me, I think it's great that there's more and more people come into the rally world, and there's more people that don't rely on sponsorship. And I think sometimes you could say, well, if you've been sponsored and you're more answerable to someone, it's not your own money, then you could give up more easy. For me, it was the opposite. I felt that the bit of cash I had raised, I couldn't let anybody down. And whether if you are able to do it off your own back, which is fantastic, whether it's easier to give up, I don't know. I think it's just you as a person.
Interesting. So when it comes to choosing your...
I'm just cruel. Hard.
So when it comes to choosing bikes, realistically, you've got two options. You can go with kind of a pre-made bike like a KTM 450 RR or the Yamaha, which is as close to a pre-made bike as you can get from an enduro bike, or you can go down that route of riding a 450 EXE with some kind of kit on it. So how much does bike choice matter? How do you help people in deciding their bike choice, and what are the kind of things that they need to be thinking about?
Good question. And because we had probably a few more issues with bike choice this year in Africa Race, it is important, but at the end of the day, it's not my money, it's the customer's money. They're spending their own money. So normally, if they've come out to Morocco with me, that's given me the chance to see. So if someone says to me, look, I want to buy a 450 RR, I can afford that. They haven't necessarily got the ability at the moment, but I want to get that ability, and it's their money, then great.
So for you, there's a different, there's an ability difference required to ride those two bikes.
Yes. Probably less so now than there used to be, because they have just got that much smaller and that much lighter to the current model. It is more similar to an EX, let's say the orange brand, and more similar to an EXC now than that ever used to be. You know, I've still got a 660 that had 48 litres of fuel, so that was very different than the 525 that I finished on. So the gap is narrower, but they are still different. Cost-wise, there's not a huge amount by the time you've kitted out properly. And it's but it comes down, I think, to the level of the rider, also the build and the fitness of the rider, and how they want to do. You know, if someone has come to me and goes, right, Patsy, I'm a good enduro rider, I'm going to spend 2 years at this, and I want to go for a position, then a factory rally bike is the way to go. If someone comes to me that's kind of done a bit middle of the road and just wants to finish, and I can see that actually their level of riding and their fitness, then we've had quite a number of customers finish big events on an enduro-based bike. But the other thing now, I think you've got to take into that whole bigger picture, is that bikes are being built to lesser tolerances mechanically, I feel a little bit, and to a cost. And so possibly, I'm not qualified, possibly the enduro bikes aren't like the good old 525 used to be.
Yeah, they've lost a little bit of that bulletproof.
Yes. And even probably in the last sort of 1 to 3 years, possibly, we had issues this year on that race. But you could also go with an RR, and if you haven't really learnt to ride that bike, you would be far more tired more quick, certainly in the dunes. So that bike's great on the piste, it's really solid, it's very stable, being a longer chassis, but you get it in the dunes. So if you haven't mastered the sand, you could be knackered really quickly. At the same time, it's because it's easy to go fast, that's the thing I've said to the lads that have gone down that route. It's very easy to go fast on the flat, but you've got to know where you're riding that bike and be able to rein, because it is very stable. So you could kind of look at an event like Dakar and you think, well, how much actually is dunes and how much is piste? So where am I going to gain? And am I going to put all the effort in to be able to train and really get to grips with that bike? So, and what's going to be, where are the who's going to have the most spares? So Dakar, really, and because that bike now is so much more rideable, the RR, this is, and smaller, and if you want to push it, statistically, it's probably, you've got more chances of not blowing an engine. But I've also seen them blow an engine. So you can't, it's a big rounded package, all of this. You've got to have that big chunk of luck. You've got to put all the effort in, all the training in, mechanical training, and then try and go with the right choice. But it is important. And it's what's right for one person is not right for the other.
Okay, interesting. It's complicated.
I did have one of the guys that went to Africa Race this year. He came out to me to Morocco, and he was on a 500. Tall, big, very strong. I said, if you take that bike to Africa Race, you're going to break it. So he went and bought an RR, and he said, yeah, that was the right thing for me to do. And sometimes very difficult, because if I try and get the rider to make that choice, unless I think they're really going down the wrong route, because they go, Patsy, you told me to do this, you did it. So it's difficult, and it's their money, I don't want to. it's all a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure it is. So I think kind of my last question is, if somebody sat here watching this podcast and they're kind of, I want to do Dakar, that'd be an amazing dream. What do you say to them?
Go for it.
All right.
If you have a dream,
Yeah.
any dream, go for it. Because we're all a long time dead, and when I'm 80 and I'm in my rocking chair, I bore people now. That's the old team. When I did, but any dream, you've got to go for it. We're put on this earth, and we'll look at what's happening at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I never regretted anything. I never regretted losing my spleen. I never regretted, and each year I had those amazing adventures.
Mm-hmm.
But be sincere with yourself as to why you want to go and do it.
Okay, I think that's a good.
And if you have a partner, you need to talk to them because you're going to spend quite a bit of money.
Yes, Carl. We just had a comment from Carl. He said, "Done." He's going. So we've got a few reader questions as well. The first one is from someone who is watching right now, Michelle Brooks Olpin. She says, "Hello, Patsy. I've just joined the podcast. May I ask how you coped with picking up your bike when it fell? I have changed my bike to a lighter one so I can feel more capable and confident."
I think I was probably one of those very lucky females that I've always been naturally quite strong, and I've done very manual jobs. And again, it comes back to the adrenaline. When I really needed to be able to pick that bike up, even the 660, I don't think it was full with 48 litres, but I look back now and I think, oh my God, I had to do it. And I think with technique, start and actually practice. If you've got your bike, actually practice it in the correct way, and you will build up that upper body strength very, very quickly. So you've just go on, Misha, you've got to get that technique, pick your bike up, go out to the garage 5 times, come in, have a gin and tonic, go back out there. And
whoa, mid gym session gin and tonic. There you go. Hot off the press, Dakar training. That goes against some conventional fitness wisdom.
It's Friday.
So we had a couple of questions on our YouTube as well. So what is more important, being a Clubman rider with good endurance or an expert level rider? I think someone was kind of trying to convince themselves maybe that their ability level was good enough. I
think endurance is very, very important, as much as the skill level.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can, I think probably to be a good expert, you actually have got quite good endurance. Mm-hmm. But you having very good endurance and being able to push yourself, like we said earlier, is very important.
Okay. So I think this next question is a pretty good one, actually. Is it more important for an amateur rider to invest in becoming a better rider technically through lessons, or is it better for them to put their money into roadbook training?
No, I would put your money invest it in your riding. Because that I think is still one, is that will cost more money than the roadbook training in a way. You can put the two together. So once you're of a certain ability, then to go out with people and combine training and the roadbook at the same time, which is what we do in Morocco, or go and do a rally. And that's a big learning. Once you get out there and you've had some tuition on the roadbook, which can be done quite simply. You can get the roadbook. Learn that ability.
Okay. And I think
because it's no good reading a roadbook really, really good if you're lying flat on your back.
Yeah. That's a good point. You've still got to be able to get to the end. So the last question I've got here is, what is the best endurance training you can do besides riding your bike?
Mine was life at the time.
Life.
Mine was life. I've been self-employed. I had an antique shop, did all my own deliveries. I had a pine stripping business. So I used to work really long hours. So again, but I think now for somebody, I think there is so much more available online that you can do at home. So something literally, we're lucky where we live, you could, get a big tractor wheel. There's that whole kind of CrossFit. My partner's son's done a lot of fitness. All of that. Try and think how you are on a bike. So like with endurance, it's real spurts, isn't it, of energy. Then you can sit back, then real spurts of energy again. And I think physically, I think there's a lot more out there now. Not just sitting on a rower for hours and hours, or swimming for hours, or running. You've got to have a whole rounded physical, but you've got to get that right.
The hardest bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But your bike fitness and bike time, there is nothing like being in a wet Welsh bog enduro with your kit trying to get round to go. Do I really want to go to Dakar?
Yes, I think there's quite a few of us that know that well in the UK.
I think Romaniacs is the only other event that we support that I feel that there's similarities. You've done Romaniacs.
I have.
You are so exhausted.
Yep.
So it is hard in this country. You've just got to think. You've just got to push yourself physically.
Yeah, for me, that's probably the hardest race I've ever done.
Yes.
It was emotional. Yeah, very good. So I think that's probably everything I've got to ask you. So yeah, before we kind of wrap this up, tell everyone what you've got going on. What do you do?
Well, lots. A little bit quieter at the moment, although I'm very lucky. I've been out on the trials bike at home and being very careful, I might add, so not to put any more stress on the NHS. But so Desert Rose Racing, we're waiting to see, obviously, when the world will return to more normality as far as rallies go. The Academy, the Adventure Riding Academy, hopefully we'll be able to open up soon, perhaps with smaller numbers. And from that, we take everyone that's never ridden a bike before up to Dakar. And last year we launched the Desert Rose Kids Academy. So we're doing that on the Osset bikes. And hopefully we'll also be able to do coaching with the children that specifically want a petrol engine bike. It's just trying to get the ground and the noise right a little bit more with those. And we've just opened our new workshop, Desert Rose Dirt Tech, with Joe Dan. Harry's running the academy. So yeah, there's still a lot going on.
And which races do you normally support?
It's more which ones we don't. Really, I'll go anywhere where the numbers work. So it goes from last year from Africa race in January. I normally do my boot camp in February. Tuareg in March. Although next year I'm looking at perhaps something different at that time of the year. Morocco Desert Challenge, as I mentioned before, in April, along with Iria Raid, which is brilliant for somebody that wants to learn a road book. It's a raid through 7 countries, GPS or road book. So when you're not under that pressure of a race, it's fantastic for getting your head round. Hellas Rally, Albania Rally, Romaniacs, Ceres, Transanatolia in Turkey. Then we have Mazuga, basically all of them.
Sounds hectic.
Yes, I think we've covered like 10 to 12 rallies in 12 months or something.
Nice. Very good. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's all I've got to ask you. If those of you watching are new to this podcast, this is typically a Patreon only podcast, so it's a paid for podcast that we run on our channel. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time. We run 3 of these a month. So if you're interested in that, head to our Patreon page. You can find it, Break Magazine's website. And otherwise, thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Happy weekend to everybody out there.
Yeah.